Hey everybody, TC Kirkham, TKR WeatherCentral and the Kirkham Report. This is just going to be me rambling, but it was supposed to be more. I'm going to have more stuff in it, but it's not going to be the way I had hoped it would be because I just got so busy during Eurovision week. But today is an anniversary that is seared into my mind forever. It's May 18th, and 45 years ago today, May 18th, 1980, was the day I will never forget. I'm lucky I wasn't in the deepest part of it, but it was still an incredible experience. At the time, my mom and I lived in Harrington, Washington. It's a small town 50 miles southwest of Spokane. We had been there since 1976 and would be there until the summer of 81. It was the third time in my life I'd lived in Harrington. I lived there when I was a little baby, and again when I was 6, going to kindergarten, and then we moved there after my mom and stepfather split up. We moved to Harrington again so she could be around friends that she knew. We lived in a little house. Hopefully I'll have a picture of it. In Harrington. It was a pretty big house for 2 people. We had 4 bedrooms, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs. It was smaller bedrooms downstairs and larger ones upstairs. But May 18th started off as, any normal day would have in Harrington. We were up in the morning, getting ready for church. We went to the United Methodist Church every Sunday. My mom and I were both very active in the church. And I was upstairs, and I had KJRB 790 AM radio, the local big top 40 station, where I had it on so Casey Kasem would start at 9 o'clock and I could catch the beginning of American Top 40 before we left for church. About 8:32 in the morning, the whole house shook, and we heard an enormous sonic boom. Mom was in the bathroom downstairs. I came to the stairs went upstairs because the bedrooms upstairs were the front one, and then there was one attached to the other one. And so my main bedroom was actually downstairs. My front room was my office and study area, and my back room was my music room, where I had all my records and stuff like that. And that's where I was. I came to the stairs. I said, "Mom, did you hear that?" She said, "Yeah, I don't know what that was. I haven't heard a sonic boom in ages." Because they had stopped happening. We lived near Fairchild Air Force Base when I was a small child. It's just outside Spokane, and we lived in various areas around Spokane, so we'd occasionally hear them. But nothing like this one. It was loud, and it was big enough to literally shake the house. The house vibrated for about 15 seconds. I went back into the music room, and 2 minutes later, the DJ on duty cut in. We have a report that Mount Saint Helens has exploded. So, Mount Saint Helens, which had been active since March of that year, had finally erupted, apparently. And they were like, there's no danger to the Spokane area, as far as we know, and they gave a report on what they knew about it at the time. Of course, nobody had seen the footage yet, or the pictures. So I went to the stairs. I went downstairs. I said, that was St. Helens. It blew up this morning. It erupted this morning. And she's like, oh my goodness. I'm glad we don't live over there. Yeah, so was I. I, for some reason, did not stay for full church services. Today we left for church about 9:15. We weren't thinking anything of it. We said hi to Mrs. Jenkins, who was out in her garden. Mrs. Jenkins was our landlady. She lived a block away, but she kept a large plot of land in the rear part of our house that she kept her garden in, and asked us to keep an eye on it, water it when she couldn't get over, and we did. She was a very nice lady. We waved and we went off to church. Sunday school was over at 10:30, and I elected not to stay for church. I don't remember why. Usually I would, but on this particular morning, something told me I need to go home. So I went home. I got home about, I don't know, 11:15. We were 4 blocks from the church. Didn't take that long to walk. And Harrington's a small town. It only had, at the time, it had 500 and some people. Now it's down to under 400. But it was, you could walk the whole town in less than half an hour. So I walked back up to my house. Mrs. Jenkins was still out in her garden. And I went out and I chatted with her for a couple of minutes, asked her what she was planning or what she was growing. And we were laughing and chatting. I went back inside, poured myself a drink, and went in my bedroom and started doing something, studying something, I think. And it was getting close to 12 noon, and I had the radio on. I was listening to AT40. They were giving reports about Mount Saint Helens and what had happened. And about 11:45, 11:50, an enormous ash cloud is heading toward western Washington. So I didn't have any windows that faced west, or not directly west. We had southwest, and then where I was in the house, my little bedroom had no windows that I could get to. It was up high. It was a tiny one. It had a curtain over it. Bathroom didn't have a window that I remember, and Mom's room window was on the front, on her bedroom. So I went out front, couldn't see anything. Went out to the kitchen, out to the little. There was like a former back porch that they had enclosed and made part of the kitchen, and looked out the window. And I have never seen anything like that in my life before. Now, I grew up in tornado country. Remember, I grew up part of my life in Ohio. So you guys know that from the Super Outbreak special I did last year. The sky was slowly turning pitch black, like you would see in a severe thunderstorm. I went in the living room, I turned on the television. Channel 2, KREM, was already on the air with footage from west of us, Yakima, Ellensburg, and a number of other places, who were now in total darkness. And ash was falling everywhere. My thoughts of getting lunch ready for Mom and I vanished for a couple of minutes. I got up, I calmed myself down. I was 17 years old at the time. Walked out the back door, calmly walked up to Mrs. Jenkins, and I said, Mrs. Jenkins, you need to go home. And she's like, well, why? It's just going to rain. I said, no, ma'am, that's Mount Saint Helens. That's ash. You need to be in the house. They don't know what it's going to do. And she looked at me, and she looked frightened. Oh, my goodness, are we going to get buried? I said, I don't think so. But the people on the news are telling everybody to stay indoors. They don't know what it can do. Do you want me to walk you home? Because she lived a block away. And she's like, no. Help me put my equipment away. Because they owned what used to be Harrington's lumber house was right next to us. It was a lumber yard. And they owned that, and they'd closed it years ago and now used it as a warehouse. So we walked over, and I helped her put her rake and stuff away, and watched her as she started to walk down the street, and I wished her well. And I went back in the house. It was now just about noon. I opened a can of tuna fish, I think it was. Might have been chicken, and made some tuna salad or chicken salad for lunch for when Mom got home from church. The blackness is continuing to grow in the sky to the southwest of us. Um, I was worried about Mom, but of course there were no cell phones at the time, and it was Harrington. I knew she'd be fine. She comes walking in the door at about 20 after 12. She decided not to stay for coffee. They usually have coffee after services. And she's like, "We're going to get a hell of a thunderstorm." I said, "No, Mom, that's not what you think it is." And she looked at me and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "That's ash from Mount Saint Helens." And she followed me into the living room and we sat down on the couch and were glued to the news for the next couple of hours. I don't remember when exactly after Mom got home that it, but by 1:30 in the afternoon, it had completely overtaken Harrington to the point where the streetlights were on and it was pitch black. And a fine white ash had just started to fall. It would continue to fall for the next 12 hours, getting darker and darker and darker. And of course, it got dark after 7 o'clock at night, so it was dark and the ash was still falling. My mom and I sat. I grabbed the bowl and we sat on the couch and made our sandwiches. And we were watching the news. We were flipping back and forth between all three channels. All three channels were showing news for a while. Channel 2 was our CBS affiliate, Channel 4 our ABC affiliate, and Channel 6 our NBC affiliate. Harrington didn't have cable in 1979. That's all we had, plus PBS. And I don't think they were on the air, actually. We would flip back and forth between Channel 6 News, which is what my mom preferred, and Channel 2, who was the first to cover it. Channel 4's news never really interested us. And we would watch, and we'd just spend the rest of the afternoon watching TV, wondering what was happening. They would continue to report all of these horror stories coming out of the areas right adjacent to St. Helens, which had been devastated by the explosion, where the trees had all fallen, where they'd had a massive flood. Spirit Lake was gone. Assumably Harry Truman had been killed in the blast. He was still on the mountain, living there. The tough old man that became the symbol of Mount St. Helens, at least out west. I don't know if it was all over the country or not. They made a movie about him called St. Helens with Art Carney that was absolutely terrible. And that's talking as a disaster movie fan. We watched the Olympic trials, which were kind of ridiculous because at that point Carter had already said we were boycotting the Moscow Olympics. So I think he had, at least. I know I remember them saying, it seems a pity that they're doing all this and they're not even going to Moscow. And that was over their invasion of Afghanistan, I believe. Of course, Russia boycotted our Olympics in Los Angeles in 1984. It allowed us to win a lot more medals than we would have. But it didn't seem like there would be anything terrible. We could see the ash was accumulating similar to snow outside. Only this wasn't going to melt. We received a call. Mom received a call. Mom was the head cook at Harrington School. And being the small town it was, Harrington, grades K through 12, were all in the same school building. One half of the school building on the left half, the north half, was the grade school. The gymnasium and multipurpose room and the swimming pool separated it from the junior high and high school, which was on the south end. Mom received a call from probably Mr. Amstadt, the superintendent, but it may have been Mr. Evovold, the vice principal. Don't bother to come to work. We're shutting down for the week. Now, we had just had spring vacation like 3 weeks earlier. And we're shutting down until we know what's going on. There won't be any school, at least tomorrow, and probably going to be shut down for the week. They didn't know what it was going to do to motors, and most of the kids, 75 to 80% of the kids lived in the farm country around Harrington. Just the town kids made up barely 10% of the school. So we were cool with that. I was happy with that. I hated school. Um, in the evening, I went upstairs. I listened to the coverage from KSL Salt Lake. I could pick it up really well at the end in the evening, and it was an all news channel, and they were covering Mount Saint Helens as much as the national news was too. And we were watching the stuff. It was a pretty frightening experience. Harrington was, as the crow flies, around 270 miles northeast of St. Helens, and we were directly in the path of the ash cone. We got 6 inches of ash in Harrington. Ritzville, south of us, got 9 inches. It was a mess in Ritzville for several days. Harrington seemed to not have that much problem cleaning it up off the streets. By Wednesday, I'd say most of it was gone off the streets. School was canceled for the whole week, and which is good because some of the teachers did not live in the area. Mr. Burns, who was on the road coming back, Mr. Burns went home every weekend. He had an apartment in Harrington, but he lived in Port Angeles, which was over off near Seattle. And he would go home every weekend for his wife, to his wife. And he would drive. He didn't fly. He was driving on the road, and I believe he got stuck somewhere in the middle of the state, probably Ellensburg or somewhere around there. He was stuck there for 2 days. Um, uh, but all the the way it was going, it looked like things would be back to normal. Well, they were worried about all the ash suffocating the various farms, that it would kill all the wheat. And for a month or so, it looked like it was going to. But when harvest started that August, there was such a surplus that both grain elevators in town were overflowing, so much to the point where there were 3 giant piles of grain stacked up next to the main elevator. It was incredible. The harvest was huge that year. My mom worked out at Moeller every summer. She would be working the weighing the trucks in when they would deliver to the Moeller elevator, which was 8 miles south of Harrington. Just a little hole in the wall with the weight and the elevator and a few houses. One of my classmates lived there, and it was huge too. By Monday morning, the ash cloud had lifted. The sun was out. The ash was everywhere, and like they were cleaning it up. And as I said, it got cleaned up by Wednesday. They were testing it. It didn't seem to be damaging. Try not to breathe it in. Try not to start. Don't use your windshield wipers. It'll cut holes in your glass. We didn't have a car anyway at that point, I don't think we did. I think that was after our car broke down, and life went on as usual. But living through that was a pretty incredible experience. It was 45 years ago today, May 18th, 1980. And I wish we had a video camera so I would have had a video record of what we saw. Mrs. Jenkins made it through fine. They called us on the phone on Wednesday and said that their kids were coming in to make sure they had to help clean them up because they had quite a bit in there. They had a house with a large yard and stuff, and they were coming in, made sure we were okay, and we were. It was more psychological than physical when it came to frightening. I mean, the ash didn't really hurt you unless you breathed it in really hard. And we took great pains not to do that. We'd wrap our face with a towel or whatever whenever we went outside to shovel, because we had sidewalks to shovel to get rid of it, into a pile that Mr. Jenkins was going to have picked up by a service from Spokane the following week. And I did all that work. And I didn't have any problems with it. It was a surreal day and a surreal evening because most of the network news coverage had specials on about it, and it was weird watching it. As I did last year, I wanted to run down the top songs and show you the sights and sounds of what happened, and I might get a few of those in here. I don't know, but I can tell you on the radio that day, what was on the radio that day. The top 10 songs in America at the time Mount Saint Helens exploded. Number 10 was Cars by Gary Newman. Number 9 was Ride Like the Wind by Christopher Cross. Number 8, Hurt So Bad by Linda Ronstadt. Number 7, Stomp by the Brothers Johnson. Number 6, Biggest Part of Me by Ambrosia. Number 5 was Sexy Eyes by Dr. Hook. And number 4 was Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer by Kenny Rogers and Kim Carnes. Number 3 was Lost in Love by Air Supply. Number 2, Funky Town by Lip Sync. And still at number 1 that week was Call Me by Blondie. Those songs, along with Against the Wind, The Rose, Coming Up, Brass in Pocket, She's Out of My Life, they were all on the radio that day. And having the radio on after about 4 o'clock and going upstairs listening to music and news coverage and music, I think helped keep us calm. Mom stayed perfectly normal. She was worried, but not overly scared. And ultimately, we made it through. It was not something that you wouldn't survive. We were too far away to be affected by the blast itself. But believe me, it is eerie sitting in your living room, looking out your living room window at 2:30 in the afternoon, and it is as pitch black as midnight. People in Alaska go through that all the time. I don't know if I could. One day was enough for me. And I just thought maybe you might be interested in hearing about it. And I wanted to get it out of my system because I've never talked about it in a general way like that before. I'd love to know if you've experienced something similar. So please leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And even if you were across the country, what do you remember about the eruption of Mount Saint Helens on May 18th, 1980? I'd like to know. I'd like to know how old you were, what you remember seeing on TV, or if you were in Washington State, what you remember seeing, because the Seattle area didn't get anything. Walla Walla didn't get much of anything. It all went up through Wenatchee, Ellensburg, Ritzville, Harrington, Spokane, and up that way. And it was a surreal experience that I will never forget. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I appreciate it. I'm TC Kirkham, TKR Video Central and the Kirkham Report. I will see you on the interwebs. Hopefully, not living through any more volcanoes. Ciao, baby.